So the PPSA is the Personal Property Securities Act. It was a new piece of law passed by Commonwealth Parliament in 2009 and it commenced operation in 2010. It radically reforms the law of security interests and it also affects other areas of law such as leasing and sale and purchase of assets. There's two main things that lawyers need to know about it. The first is knowing when it applies and knowing how it affects clients' operations and transactions. And in particular, that involves knowing what is the security interest and what do you need to do to perfect it. And since perfection usually means registration, that means you need to know how the registration system works. So security interest is very broadly defined. There are two parts to it. The first part is an in-substance definition. Anything that's an interest in personal property, where the transaction in substance secures payment or performance of an obligation, satisfies the in-substance definition. So that includes things like traditional charges and mortgages, but it also includes new things like retention of title clauses in supply contracts. That's the first part. The second part is the deemed security interests, things that don't meet that test but are still treated as security interests. And there are three of them. What they call transfers of account or chattel paper, which is things like debt factoring, commercial consignments, and what they call PPS leases, which is goods leases and some bailments. Okay, perfection's a central concept in the PPSA. Perfection is the word they use for the highest level of protection that you can get for a security interest. There are three ways to achieve it: possession of collateral or control or registration. And in practice, registration is the one that's used the most. Perfection is such a central issue because of the consequences if you don't do it. Three main ones: your security interest loses priority, the collateral can be sold free of your security interest even if the purchaser has notice of your security interest, and third, if the grantor goes into bankruptcy or liquidation or voluntary administration, your security interest can be lost altogether if it hasn't been perfected. The registration process should be easy. All you have to do is enter details of the secured party, details of the collateral, and details of the grantor. But there are some issues. You've got to describe parties in the correct way, and that can be tricky if there are trusts or partnerships or other unusual entities. You've got to describe collateral in the correct way. First, that involves selecting a class. There are over 20 classes to choose from. Sometimes you need more than one. And then there are additional details that you need to come to grips with and enter. Things like, do you have control of it? Is there what they call a PMSI, or a purchase money security interest? And it's important to understand all these details to make sure that you don't just achieve perfection, but you also get the highest level of protection available under the Act. It's quite different from registering a company charge with ASIC. It's online, whereas ASIC involved lodging paper forms. You just give brief details of your interest, whereas ASIC required you to lodge copies of the agreement. You can make one registration that will perfect multiple security interests under multiple security agreements, whereas ASIC would have required a separate registration for each. And a big difference in practice, you can and often should make your registration before the transaction closes, whereas with ASIC you always did it afterwards. Three things practitioners need to know. First is to understand the basics of the law. It's not an area that you can just leave to the banking and finance specialist in the office. It affects lots of transactions in lots of different areas, and at least the basics have to be known. The second thing is to understand how the register works, so you can do registrations when you need to. The third is to understand how searching the register works, because searches are important for a lot of transactions, for M&A transactions, for anything where something's being bought and sold and there might be a security interest in place, as well as for financing transactions. The Practical Guidance module addresses the main things that practitioners need to know to use the register. It starts off with an overview of what are security interests, when will the Act apply, so when might you find yourself in this territory. It goes on to deal with how to register security interests, how the register works, how to choose the class, how to describe parties. And it also deals with searching. It tells you how to search the register, when you might need to search the register, and has some tips on interpreting the results.
Discover more practical content on the PPSA and PPSR within our Practical Guidance Personal Property Securities module. If you haven't already, register for a free trial on our website today.